Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Are you a nonprofit professional who's feeling overwhelmed and burnt out? Well, welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am your host, Haley Cooper. On this podcast, we will share stories of leadership, courage, and empathy that'll help you learn to take care of yourself, your staff, organization, and community. You will hear from nonprofit leaders who have been in your shoes and have learned best practices to raise more revenue and make a greater impact. Let's thrive together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. And I am so excited, like beyond excited and honored to have Jenny Mitchell on the podcast. We met about a year ago, and she is just a wealth of knowledge and also just a delight of a human being. And she is the Chief Visionary Officer of Chavender, where she works closely with not-for-profit leaders to change the world one mission at a time. She is also a dynamic speaker, executive coach, fundraising professional, and host of the Underdog Leadership podcast. And Jenny also just wrote her new book, Embracing Ambition, Empowering Women to Step Out, Be Seen, and Lead, which we're going to dive into a lot today. But before we get started and just go there, welcome, Jenny, to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for such a lovely introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here, Haley.
Well, I would love to know a little bit more about how your experiences in the nonprofits and then becoming a consultant have shaped your understanding of leadership and led you to write this book.
Well, let me start with me. So ironically, it's a long journey to fundraising, right? Nobody really wakes up and says, hey, I'm going to be a professional fundraiser. So I actually fell into fundraising, raising money for pianos. So I'm a classical musician, lived and worked in New York City for 11 years. I am Canadian, but I loved my time in New York and started raising money for pianos. That's how I started and loved it, loved the community feel and this idea that we could come together and make something better. I'm all about being one step better than yesterday. And as I went through this journey of being a consultant and making recommendations to people, one of my realizations was the money was never the goal for me. I didn't, woohoo, we raised $1 million, $5 million, $10 million. It was always the people, the growth in the people that I really love to see. So that young person that asks for their first gift, or when the strategy is right for the campaign and everything just clicks and it starts to roll. And I loved being a part of that. And so that's what brought me to executive coaching, Haley, was that I knew that to make the kind of culture change, which will relate to your audience and your passions, you had to get in the senior leadership suite. You had to get the ears of the people that were modeling the culture. And when I found executive coaching, I was like, oh, this is like me. It's all about the concept of coming to a coaching session, being fully whole, a sovereign person, already full of ideas and ambitions and strengths, and then creating space for reflection and a place for someone to go. So that's a long intro to say that I am not going anywhere. This is where I am staying, executive coaching, and particularly women leaders, to your point. So very quickly about the book. It came out of, I'm an academic, right? I did a PhD in piano. So book was like the ultimate, Haley. It was like the gold standard, but I found it very intimidating. And you may relate to this, that the idea of doing it by myself was really uninteresting. Who am I? Not so much who am I, but what the hell would I have to say for a whole book that would relate to as many people as possible? And the minute I started thinking of it as a collaborative book with 12 women, the light bulb went off. And that is what I think is the most beautiful part about embracing ambition is it's from 12 different perspectives, but the learnings are the same.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you so much for that introduction and a little bit more about who you are as a human. And I would love to know, you mentioned executive coaching. Can you talk, before we dive into the book, can you talk a little bit more about what coaching is? Because I think a lot of people don't understand like the difference between coaching and mentorship and like the added value that someone should invest in it. So can you talk a little bit more about what executive coaching is and what it looks like?
That's a great point and a really misunderstood one. So let's just think about riding a bicycle. So the consultant tells you how to ride the bicycle. Says, put your hands here, do this, do that. The mentor says, when I was riding my bicycle, this is how I did it. And the coach says, how are you feeling? Is it comfortable? Where would you like to go? Do you need to put a little bit more effort here? What are you noticing? So a coach experience, and it's really important to me for your listeners to understand, this is not coaching as in the new phrase I heard was coaching for compliance versus coaching for compassion. Coaching for compliance is do it this way because this is the best way, or to get someone to do something. I don't do that coaching. That is not what I'm about. Coaching for compassion is about helping somebody create a space for reflection, to challenge, absolutely, Haley, to question, to provide insights. A lot of the time I describe myself as a mirror. Like I hold up a mirror and I say, I'm hearing this. Is this resonating with you? Ironically, it starts to feel a lot like major gifts because you're really only creating the space for the conversation. You can't control the coachee is always in charge. That's one of my other core tenets. And so they direct the conversation with you as partner, guide, cheerleader, questioner. And I think the most important thing in a coaching relationship is trust. It takes time, but building trust so that space is really special and people can be their full selves.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think trust is the foundation of any relationship. And I also think asking questions that I always talk about like generative questions, but
Yeah.
people generally have the answer within them. Sometimes they just need that safety and that space to open up and have someone ask the right question for them to figure out that future that was already in them. They just need that little push or fire to be ignited within them. And I think a coach has that capacity to provide that space for that person.
You put that so nicely. And the answer for me is different than the answer for you, to your point about having that inkling and that intuition. And I think for a lot of smart women, one of the things that happens is we get cut off at our necks, Haley. We think we can think our way out of something. And I know that you'll relate to this, that we actually feel first and then logicize our way out of things. And so helping people reconnect with their core and their values and what's most important to them can make them feel as they're going through leadership. I work with a lot of brand new executive directors and CEOs. I also work with a lot of people who are looking to make change in their careers. Having that fresh perspective is really insightful. Is not the right word because there's that, but it's almost like you didn't know what you didn't know. I thought there was only one door, but you're right. There's actually 3 doors. That's game changing. And people that are around you notice that. So at the end of the day, I've decided that this is the most powerful way for me to make my contribution on the planet. Really, truly.
Wow, that's beautiful. And obviously, you wrote this book by inviting 12 exceptional women leaders with one common goal to share their leadership stories as a mentorship resource for the next generation of women leaders. And like I was saying off the recording, that it was like the stories were so inspiring and hopeful and made you feel less alone, but it also made you feel like you were going to coffee with a friend and learning from their experience, but not out of a jaded way, but out of a hopeful and inspiring way that I'm not alone. Other people have experienced this, but there is hope that I can find a way out of burnout or stress or different things that women face in the nonprofit field. And so I would love to learn a little bit more about your own personal story before we dive into the 5 key pillars of that consistently play a role in leadership journey. But let's back it up about your personal story and like how to trying to lead the right way. And after modeling after others robbed you of your confidence.
Yeah. And it's still, my stomach still tremors when you say it that way, because it's real, Haley. So the story I share in the book is about, of course, as a consultant, I could go back to my younger years, but I didn't have organization leadership experience. So my story is about being a board chair of an organization that I care very deeply about. And I think the takeaway in the story, and maybe your listeners will appreciate this, I was the kid that jumped every hurdle you put in front of me. I was the kid that was like, how high, right? And keen and motivated. And I always thought that was a strength. And it is a strength, let me be clear. But when I got into the board chair position, and I had all sorts of good people skills, Haley, I knew I could work with people. I knew I had a lot of empathy, all those good things. Somehow being chair really triggered in me this idea that I had to do it the right way. I had to be a certain way. And I didn't have a lot of role models. I talk about the book how my female role models for leadership were Angela Merkel and Hillary Clinton, both of whom are very masculine energy. And if you know me, I'm a very warm person. I'm a very kind person. I'm very ambitious, let's be clear, but compassion and ambition, I wanted to believe that those could coexist. And I had no models. So how it robbed me of my confidence was I ended up it became very brittle for me. I found myself being quite strident, not being able to show my full self. I was crazy prepare because I couldn't trust myself. So I'd have these crazy notes. I found one the other day of an agenda, and it was like all these crazy notes of things I needed to remember, almost like driving myself nuts. And in the story, I talk about how I had panic attacks. I'd be coming home from the gym in the car and I'd start having a panic attack. And I was like, oh boy, this is not good, Haley. Like, I can't be in the middle of the road driving a car having a panic attack. So the logical brain says, okay, well, you need to pull over, and the grocery store, there's no benches. So you should really go to the bank because they have benches at the bank. Like, this is the kind of crazy ass stuff that's coming out. And the story is about how I learned that my body was telling me, you can't lead like this. This is not you. It was literally and physically telling me this until I started listening and trying new things, trying my own collaborative way. I think I was afraid, especially the collaboration one, right? And I work with my clients about this. I don't mean that you collaborate forever. I think women get pegged with that. You can't collaborate your way out of a problem, but you can build consensus through collaboration to make a decision. And I started being clear. I remember the first time I called a vote, for example, like I thought no, people that are consensus building don't call votes. Well, at the end of the day, somebody's got to lead and we have to move forward. And that's my job. And how I got more comfortable with that and more comfortable being less of a people pleaser, because these will resonate with your audience, I'm sure. I certainly suffered from the I want everyone to like me syndrome, but it started to come down to me or them. And now at the end, I realized that I managed this organization through a very tough transition. And at the end of it, I can say that I can hold my head up high, and I did it with grace. Haley, I'm not saying I did it perfectly all the time, but I did it authentically my way. And I truly focused on the team and the people and the work. And I met every situation with honesty and compassion for the people that were in the room. And I think everybody has their kind of Waterloo moment. And that was mine.
Wow, thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing that story. And you are so strong and courageous for taking that moment to listen. I think so many of us have that hard time to just sit and listen. And that's when our body starts showing us. I think the book is Our Body Keeps Score, and it's the last thing that shows up. But the stress has been for a while, and it is really courageous it's brave. Yeah. It's scary to have to sit and listen and decide what that next step is. So you talked about really getting clear, and you've talked about this like with your executive coaches, like leaning into your values and what's important to you. And I know listening to this podcast, people are feeling this way. Most conversations I have, people are stressed out, they're burnt out, their body is keeping score, and they're looking for a way out. And I think, what are those 5 self-reflection questions every female leader needs to be asking themselves?
That's a great question. Actually, I'm going to go a different way with those 5 self-reflection questions, because rather than adding a task, Haley, I'm going to, because I think that's another thing, knee jerk. Oh, I just have to work harder. I just have to have the right question. Or in my case, I just have to have the perfect board agenda. What do you want? Why do you want it? What will feel different when you have it?
Mm.
And here's the kicker. Is it possible that you already have some of it? Because I think we're taught, and aspirational women are taught to keep chasing. And so this idea of scarcity, of that you're never there and that it's never enough and that you're fighting against the stereotype in some cases. And what I love about those questions is, well, what if you took a minute and said, well, this is working for that. This relationship sucks. But you took stock and you thought of it from an expansion way instead of a straight up linear scarcity way, rather than towards something. This idea that you're growing into something. And somehow for me, that visual is really powerful. That again, like that idea from the coaching where everybody comes to the table whole. We're not fixing people. There's a wonderful analogy that there's a great book I read one time that said, when people who care about people look at a big block of marble, they already see the beautiful sculpture inside that just hasn't been chiseled out yet. I just love that idea that we already come whole. And if we just frickin' trust ourselves, which is easy to say, not as easy to do, and to have someone to put a mirror up is so important. And I had people like that during my story. I had a VP that came up to me one day and said, "You look stressed." And of course because they did notice. And I find that it's really grounded me and that I'm much more unshakable than I used to be. It's partly age. I'm sure it's partly age. I'm not sure I could have felt this way earlier. I wish I had. When you have been in the leadership suite, you come through these situations. One of the things the book talks about is heat experiences. So most leaders who make it through have these heat experiences that really define them. And I bet if you and I talk long enough about your past experiences in not-for-profit, you have a heat experience that shaped you, defined something for you. And rather than seeing that as a negative, which it certainly is challenging, what did I learn from it? That's something I'm always thinking about, because it made you who you are and it made some choices for you clearer. But it is part of the rite of passage.
And I love the way that you frame those questions. And when I'm talking with other leaders, I always say, what do you need to feel supported? And they're like, I need more money. I need professional development. I need this and this. And I'm like, no, what do you need to feel supported in your role? It doesn't have to be all of the money in the world. You as a human being need to feel psychologically safe and trusted in yourself and in your role. And I think that people always get stunned and, oh, I've never thought of it. And it takes them a minute to really dive deep. And you just see like their shoulders drop down because someone asked them that question. And I think asking those questions are so important.
Yeah, you interrupted. You were a great coach in that moment, right? You interrupted the predetermined pathways. I had I'm working with a founder for something, and she, in passing, in one of her moments, said something along the lines of, she's really burnt out and she'd really like to take 2 months off. And I told her, I said, I'm going to hold you to that. This is not the conversation for the 2-month sabbatical, but I'm going to bring this back up because I feel like those little nuggets are moments where it's not so much a cry for help, but there's another thing I'd like to do here. And I think that's what we can do as colleagues. Maybe we're not official coaches, but just tell me more. Like, I always go for the juicy piece, Haley, in the conversation. Even with donors, like sometimes they'll say things and you'll be like, ooh, we need to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. People say things, then you have to like dive a little bit deeper, peel the onion back a little bit, for lack of a better term. So I know you talk about in your book and throughout the 12 women that have featured in the book, and in leadership roles, often we place our values in the hands of others. So how can we take back that control?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So a couple of thoughts. This was suggested by somebody I interviewed recently, and I just think it's so brilliant that I want to share it. And then what was funny was she was a corporate profile, but she was telling me about stewardship. So she was talking about how you cannot put your career in anybody else's hands. My mother used to say, nobody will take care of you the way you will take care of you. And that goes for yourself, that goes for your boundaries, and that goes for your money, actually. And we could have a whole talk about women and money. I'm going to hold myself back. So nobody's going to take care of you the way you can take care of you. But you have to believe that you're worthy of being taken care of. That's part A. And that is an epidemic of not enoughness and not being comfortable liking ourselves. That has been a personal journey for me, as I'm sure it has been for many of your listeners. So what if we thought about positioning ourselves in the organization through gratitude, through thank you notes to our leaders? So part of the challenge with putting your career in someone else's plate is they might move. And as much as they believed in that situation and you at the time, life happens. I call this spidering. I talk about this with boards too, spidering your way into the board so that there's multiple cross connections. So there's never one point of failure. We always have two people on a donor file just in case someone wins the lottery. So doing a thank you note, a proper thank you note to your boss or to your boss's boss, this is where I think it gets really interesting, so that they have visibility into the work you're doing. Because often in our sector, when things are crazy busy, the layers don't know who's doing the work. And the Underdog Leadership Podcast is all about helping number twos become number ones. Because I saw so much of this where people would bust their butts and get none of the credit for it. All they were doing was making their bosses look good. And then they'd get completely stepped over for the next promotion or the next portfolio opportunity or whatever. So you will never regret time spent away from the office. The only thing you'll ever regret is time spent in the office. So I am a big believer in working smarter, not harder. I am a big believer in automation. I'm a big believer in streamlining things. I think we create a lot of our own problems. This is a monologue. This is like one of my pet peeves is the most redonkulous stuff we do, which most of it is self-created sometimes, not always. So asking yourself, is this really soothing me? And one of the simple things I've been doing is really looking at my evenings. I used to think I had to be at every single fundraising event in town to be seen, and I just can't do it anymore. So that was like a roundabout answer, but did I get to the root of the question?
Yes, you did. And I think you brought up so many important points. And that's why we have this podcast, right? Okay. To talk about the monologues, to go on and really allow people to be seen and feel less alone. And you made a good point about own. And when you were talking, I was like, you're preaching to me, because I have had my own journey of having to find my own worth and place in the world and really nurture myself and almost like reparent myself, especially as a parent, but really find that worth and contribution. So in what ways do you coach women to prioritize their own worth independent of external validation or recognition?
That's a great question. So it really does start with you. And one of the things I will say to a lot of women is nobody actually takes away your power. Usually you have given it away. And they often don't like to hear that. And I know that's really harsh, but it usually prompts a very interesting conversation about where they've abdicated choice in their own life. So I don't have a self-care or any of those languages kinds of routines, but I do believe in self-compassion. So I am constantly reminding myself and refilling the pot of all the things that I did get done, because I am that person that finishes on Friday and talks about all the things that I didn't get done. And it's a thing. It's just a thing. And I'm just going to have to accept that it's part of me and it's the way I'm wired. I'm working on it. But we also know neurologically, just you're talking about neurology, we need 3 positives to counteract 1 negative. And the reason is that this is survival for us in the old world. You needed to remember where the jaguar was around that particular tree. So your body and your wiring prepares you. Any kind of negative things are very difficult for you to take. One thing I've noticed as I get older is when I'm more comfortable in myself, and when I'm more calm, I can receive negative feedback differently. And so it's not that it doesn't hurt, or maybe it does, but I see it as a data point rather than as a personal affront. And when it's a data point, I can actually transition it to the learner mindset, which is, okay, well, what is of value here? One of the things that I often say to clients is everybody is always 10% right. So you may completely agree with them. I'm thinking of campaign cabinet chairs or whatever, but there's 10% of what they're saying that is correct. And if you can find that, you stay in a positive outset rather than going to right to the negative, and that won't work. Because once you start, Haley, it's a downward spiral both ways. And I think the other thing is timelines. Just because it's not going to get done this week doesn't mean it's not going to get done. It's just on a different timeline. And that somehow just takes this weight off me. I don't know why I take it on so personally that it has to get done right now. Like the world must stop and we must do this thing right now. And I take on the entire weight of the world for this. And I'm speaking to your fundraiser friends. We get comfortable walking around with a target on our back and we hold it like a badge of honor sometimes and make it as an excuse for all the things that we don't do for ourselves. So that might be a really interesting wake-up call for some of our listeners here today.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yeah, I feel like I'm having a coaching call right now because you are talking about all the things my husband tells me I need to work. The negativity, like when there's like a doctor here in Costa Mesa, Dr. Amen, and he always talks about like at the end of the day, he focuses on 3 things that went really well. And I was like, I need to implement that in my practice. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I didn't do this and this. And I can't get to that, like the things I did check off my to-do list, or I have these crazy timelines in my brain that I've made up that don't really have a necessary deadline. But like in my brain, I'm like, yes, it has to be done tomorrow. Or like, you have to take out the trash right now. Like,
yeah,
all of these things that I've made up in my brain. But like that sense of urgency, it's there for me. It's a reality experience for me, but it's not really grounded in actual reality, which I think they're different, right? But like my experience is it has to be done right now. But the reality of it is it can be done in 30 minutes next week. And I think a lot of us struggle with that delineation between our experience and what actual reality can look like.
Yeah, I love this conversation because the other thing I've been playing with in my mind is, because I've been asking a lot of questions, why do I do that? What is it about that I keep coming back to? And the research on neurology will say that's actually where your comfort zone is. When you have been raised in a place where stress is normal, when you have been in a place, whatever your backstory about how you fit into a family dynamic, and now I'm going back to your inner child. I had someone say one time in a major gifts presentation I was doing about money, she said, Jenny, is this really at the end of the day all about healing your inner child? And I was like, yeah, basically, because if your inner child, or if the way you operate in the world is full of stress and anxiety and you've become really normal, when you go to try and do something different, Haley, your body is going to want to suck you back into the way you've always been doing it. And you're going to feel really weird when you say, click, I'm done at 4:00. I've done enough. It's going to try and look for ways to bring you back to the way you were. And so I don't know I hope that somebody out there listening remembers this comment. And when that weirdness happens, they go, oh, this is me living in my body differently. And it's taken time. And I still find little itches of it. Like I'll start to pack. And I realized that like when kids were younger, the packing was really stressful for me because I realized it wasn't the packing. It was leaving my kids for 3 days. And so I had this association with conferences that they were really stressful because every time I tried to go away, I would start throwing extra projects in just before I left because that made me feel safe as I was packing this suitcase to go away. And what I really should have slowed down in hindsight is to say, I'm just worried about the kids. And I should have verbalized it and labeled it. And maybe my husband would have been able to pick up some of that slack, but I never did. I just kept it all just so I could feel safe. And that's a real thing. It's biological.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think the other hope that we can offer listeners is can change. Not that I'm a doctor, but I have this in my own experience from working in therapy and everything like that. You can change those neural pathways and you can change. And I had Dr. Robin Graham on my podcast. We talked about anxiety as leadership, and gratitude does play a role in helping change that, where let's say there's traffic, but you're not the one in the accident and you can be grateful that like in your car. And so just changing those little ways that you view things actually will start to change how you show up. And it's grounded in neuroscience. I've seen it in my own life, so I know it's reality. So listening to this and feeling like I'm not there yet, it's okay. You're not alone. And there is hope for that change.
I love that. And there really is hope. And all you need is a start, a beginning, a choice.
Yeah. You talk about ambition, and that's the name of your book. And often when you ambition in women, it's like there's a bad connotation to it, right? And women can't be associated with ambition. We're supposed to be mothers. We're supposed to take care of our kids. We're supposed to not have these dreams and these goals. So how do you coach female leaders to reclaim the word ambition while still maintaining compassion?
You ask good questions, Haley. That is the crux of the whole thing. So I'm not sure, when did ambition as a woman start to become socially acceptable? I honestly don't think it's more than 10 years ago. Like, I even think 10 years ago, what's that, 2014, it was still taboo. I want to do a shout out to the women that came before me. One of the things that I noticed about the women, they're 70, and they tell some pretty hideous stories about their experiences, by the way, in male dominated spaces, was they had to fight for everything. They had to scrap. They had to stand up for themselves. They got tough exteriors. They did it by hook and by crook, by assimilating. And I think that where we're at with this ambition and compassion is a new era of leadership, which is pretty uncharted still, where we have big goals, we have dreams. The book tells us that these women are particularly visionary. That's one of their characteristics. They can see things, but they can show up with compassion. So rather than being the prove their worth, which is all about tasks and activities and accomplishments and goals, they can have those while still being fluid for the in the moment experiences that happen inside their teams, inside their COVID. Nobody planned for COVID. So that sort of a balance of compassion where they can see the person in front of them for who they are, not for how they're going to use them, wrong language, but same idea, but for how they could grow. And I had a dear friend of mine that said something that really resonated with me, which was, you want your people to thrive, not for your benefit, but for their benefit. If we could actually create a world and a space and a workspace like that, where you wanted people to thrive for the sake of them, that to me is what compassion really comes down to, is seeing a true person and meeting their needs where they're at. And I think that can come with firm boundaries. I don't think compassion comes with I'm a doormat. I think that's an old paradigm, but we're going to have to really clearly define it for people, Haley. I don't think it's going to be like a switch, because still, when you show compassion from the podium, when you show emotion from the podium, it scares people still, because we are not very good at dealing with emotions, actually, humans, publicly. We still think we can think our way out of things. That is changing. And we are I think it might even be a superpower.
Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfield is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today. Yeah, I was talking with my husband that I think nowadays, like, emotional IQ is higher than actual IQ, and being able to really navigate the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. And you talk about showing up as your whole self, and that's really hard. And organizations don't necessarily provide that space.
Yeah, that's a great point. So just a sidebar on, it's like any word, like the word impact. It's not one of my favorite words. Authenticity, not one of my favorite words. And $1 million campaigns, not my favorite size, because I just feel like people pick it out of the air. It almost just gets so ubiquitous that it doesn't have any meaning. So what is it to show up authentically? I think to show up authentically, I go to some of the thoughts around to feel safe, to go back to the psychological safety, to feel like you can express your opinion, and whether that's in accommodation or a dissenting opinion, and to be seen and heard, not necessarily always agreed with. I think that's where we get a little bit out of alignment, but to be part of the conversation so that you never feel like you're dismissed. I find that being dismissed in a group is a very visceral, there's almost like a shame attached to it that sticks with you as an energy over time. And you can't get that back once you've dismissed someone. So I think trying to be as aligned as possible. I think certain cultures do it better than others. I think you have to temper the culture. I don't think the banking system is a place that you can really put your heart on your sleeve yet. I think the flip side of that is social services. I want to write a book about social services and the challenges they have with accommodating everyone, breaking through tons and tons of boundaries, making a real mess of social structures at the detriment of their mission. So when there aren't clear boundaries and guardrails around things, I find things just disintegrate. And when we don't have a clear sense of community and direction, we fall apart and we start nitpicking. Like, this gets into this whole toxic workplaces thing. When there's not a clear understanding of that, it falls apart. It's a long-winded answer, but I hope what your listeners take away from it is it's a practice. And if you're feeling like you can't show up as yourself at work, that matters. And so who do you need to talk to about that?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I've coached people with that, where it's, can you show up? And if you can't, like, maybe it's time to move on. Not that I want to increase the turnover in nonprofits, but if you can't show up as your whole self, if you can't voice your fears and your needs, and you don't feel, like you said, seen and heard and not feel dismissed. In the work that I do, we talk about remaining emotionally responsive, engaged, and accessible. And when you feel dismissed, you become emotionally disconnected. And conflict is never about content. It's about emotional disconnection. It's about, I'm alone. I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard. And when that happens, then you start going for those ineffective coping strategies and there's no bad guy. The negative cycle is the bad guy, but it's just based in neuroscience, right?
Yeah.
And so we coach people to remain emotionally responsive, accessible, and engaged in those conversations where there is heightened emotion, where you are disagreeing with someone. It's okay to have disagreements, but it's also important to, we say ARE, accessible, responsive, and engaged. So I think that is an important piece. And then, really taking that time to feel and ask those important questions of whether this is in the way that you show up, if that's allowed.
So I want to pick up on that. I love what you just said. It's so articulate. And acknowledge that there are power dynamics happening. And so with the power dynamic, in my book, at least, the way I coach, the leader is responsible for the power dynamic. So we don't ask our staff to find a way to meet us or find a way to explain themselves to us. It is our responsibility as the leader to seek them out and to create a space for them to discuss it. That's not always the case. So that's another part. But the power dynamic is real. You can't just remove it. There's still somebody who signs checks and somebody who doesn't sign checks. Same goes for boards. But I like this idea that even if you're disagreeing, to remain connected, what you're talking about is connected, or emotionally, or in a safe space. Safe might be too far for this, but in a space, like you're showing up. That is, to me, the most important part about it. And it is our job as leaders. It's a heck of a lot harder than it was 15, 20 years ago, because people are actually bringing themselves to work. But that's the joy for me, because I'm not there for the work. I'm there for the people. Like, it's all blurred in together for me.
I love that. Well, is there one more thing that you hope listeners to get out of your book so that they can step out, be seen, and lead?
Well, I think one thing to just highlight is that this is based in research. So there are 5 pillars to the research, and your listeners will recognize them. There's glass cliff assignments, there's perception barriers, there's visionary, there's embracing challenge. The women in these books tend to take on new opportunities. And there's embodied roles. Those are the 5 pillars. Embodied roles is when you over-identify, Haley, with the constituent group you're working with. So the cancer survivor that's the head of the Cancer Research Foundation. So the lines and boundaries get really quickly blurred. And what I think the book does a nice job of is the head and the heart. So you can read the research and what it says, because a lot of this is like, oh, good, I'm not crazy. Like, we talked about how to not feel alone. This is a thing. And I want to just put a plug in here. There are women of all different colors and shapes and sizes in the book. That was really important to me, because obviously I only have my own experience to pull on. So there's the 5 pillars, but then inside the pillars, there's stories that reflect back that pillar in real time. And I wanted it to be a book about how it felt to lead, because I was tired of reading books about best practices and this is what you're supposed to do. And if you heard my story at the beginning, that really put me in a tizzy. So having these women explain and use language to describe, one gal talks about the bathroom stall as one of the first stories, and how the bathroom stall was where she went to celebrate her wins and to cry when things didn't go her way, or things were said that were hurtful to her. And I think all of us can relate to the stories, and maybe at the end, you don't feel quite as alone, and maybe you're inspired to stretch yourself just a little bit more. And knowing what these pillars are that you will probably encounter doesn't make them seem they're not so scary anymore. They're not just happening to you, they're happening to many people. That's the message, is we can do a better job of preparing women leaders into the leadership suite by giving them a little more of a bird's eye of what's going on.
That's so good. Well, if people want to find you, where can they learn more about the work that you do?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the first one, Jenny Mitchell, although there are a lot of Jenny Mitchells. So Chavender, I have a company name that's really complicated just to balance out Jenny Mitchell. Chavender is spelled lavender, but with a CH at the beginning. And so chavender.com is my website. And if you're listening to a podcast, I would just be so grateful if I think Haley and I have a lot of similar approaches. My podcast, again, is about helping number 2s to become number 1s, and it's called the Underdog Leadership Podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny, for being here. Like I said, it's like a coaching call for me, and I know it'll be so beneficial for so many of our listeners. And just go read the book. Just go and follow Jenny and all the work that she does.
Great. And you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on my website. There's lots of places for you to find it. So it's not hard to find, Haley.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.